Good afternoon and welcome to the Family Business Summit session this afternoon with Cara Macklin from Northern Ireland, where we're going to be discussing all things next generation, and in particular the role and the different role nowadays of the entrepreneurial next generation. So, Cara, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Paul. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. We're looking forward to hearing your story. So start a little bit with you and who you are and what you did, and talk a bit about the history really in terms of where you've got to today, but through your family business and the evolution of where you've come from.
Sure. So people ask me, when did I start in family business? And I said, like most of us, 5 years old around the kitchen table.
That's quite late.
My parents,
for some, wasn't it?
Pardon?
That's quite late for some, 5.
Probably earlier. That's my earliest memory. My parents started the business when I was very young in Northern Ireland. So the early days of it was care homes and property. My father was a builder and then went into hospitality, which I'll talk about. Yeah, I grew up in that environment, you know, as most next gens, you know, working in a hotel, washing dishes was my first job at, 10 or 11, maybe 12. I think I had my first business at 8, making and selling jewelry, which lost money. So I think my first business lesson there was don't rely on family and friends, because they're just nice to you. And whenever you go out to sell to other people, then customers don't like it. And then through school, my brother and I had a business running buses to local nightclubs, which did make money. So that was my first profitable business. And I suppose, I remember at school, when people say, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, everyone, I went to grammar school in Northern Ireland, everyone wants to be a doctor or an accountant, and I'm thinking, I don't want to be any of those things. I don't know what I want to be. So that's probably typical of an entrepreneur. And I still say when I grow up, I'm going to do this. So went to university. I worked in London for a while. I worked in Marks and Spencer's in their food trend studio. So that was really, I suppose, the start of my real interest in innovation and product development. And then I came back into the family business. And my first role, I suppose I went through a lot of roles in that business, but my first role was very operational. So 25, I'm managing a care home of 80 residents and 120 staff. Wow. Which, my average age of the staff were probably in their 50s. I'm 25, and any other entrepreneurial next gen out there, I'll know that you want to change the world in a day. And a business that's 30 years old and you're that age, it wasn't that easy. But great experience in terms of leadership, culture, and then I did a number of other roles. So during my time, I started in the business. We had about 200 employees. When I left, we had nearly 700. So we opened 4 or 5 businesses. During my time there, I opened 3 of them, developed a 4th one, and everything from sales and marketing, working in the hotel, on the floor, strategy development, changing our culture, set up the first HR department in the business, did all the buy-in for the group. So anything that was really focused on developing the business and growing it. And then in 2015, I got a scholarship to go back to London to do my MBA. So I was very lucky and got to work, with a lot of international people and work internationally and work with an international hotel group when I was there. And then came back to the business in 2016 with this crazy idea that I always have lots of mad innovative ideas, but this one was very much I wanted to change how elderly care was delivered in Northern Ireland. So created the first, what is now called the lifestyle care home, and that was all around, and you've heard the story of this, Paul, all around social well-being for elderly people. So to give one example, in the care home, like we have a cinema, a pub, nail bar, spa, hairdressers, cafe. It's a community space as well. Families come in. So that was very, very different for Northern Ireland. And that process was phenomenal for me in terms of, it was a no-brainer for me, but actually the huge challenge, not just creating the idea and building it is a challenge, but convincing people of something that's so different and new that hasn't been built yet is a huge challenge. And then in 2019, once I'd get that up and running, and thankfully with a great team who delivered it, it was very successful. I decided to use the experience I had, scaling businesses, and I trained as a coach as well, that I would leave and set up my own business. And now I run my own business, an advisory firm helping next gen family leaders.
So you've been on, for someone as young as you've been on a very big journey, I guess, for someone that's still very young in their career. You started off, entrepreneurial skills is obviously in your blood. You started off at 4, 5, 6, and then started a business at school and then at college, and so you've kind of done things that many of your peers at those ages would never have done. So what was the driver? Was it just inherent? Was it built within you? What was your driver personally to that point?
Yeah, I mean, people often talk about nature and nurture. I mean, it's not rocket science, the environment I grew up in. But I mean, I suppose when I look back now, and that was part of the care home and what I do now, you know, and this is not to be disrespectful to any politicians or governments, but governments do not change the world. The system does not allow them to change the world. They have to go from one election to the next. I believe business leaders and entrepreneurs change the world. So I suppose there was always that driver. And I love seeing something, you know, I walk into businesses now with clients and straight away I could see 20 different things that they could do differently or new, or so that piece about doing something even better, bringing a team around you, making them even better. Yeah, it's huge satisfaction. And, you know, I've always been extremely ambitious, and, you know, it's a great thing and an Achilles heel as well. But yeah, that's always been there.
So you obviously got your MBA, you did your education piece, you did a lot of learning, practical on-the-job learning, which I guess you know this too. A lot of people say go away and learn your skills and bring them back, which you did. Built up, and at a young age again, building up an innovative approach to healthcare and well-being for an old people's home, retirement home, was actually almost a bit before your time. And if you look at the kind of sector that was in, that's kind of the way these homes are going now. So you built that up really successful, which is fantastic, and then you decided to leave. So that must have been a really difficult. Was it a difficult decision, a big conversation, or was it?
No, it was a very difficult decision. You probably don't realize it at the time. You know, when I left, as a family member, not only as a, you know, your whole career or a big part of your career, your whole DNA, you know, everything is tied into that. Your identity, that was one piece. That's another next gen and I talk about, who has also left their family business. It was a very difficult decision. I'm lucky in that. I mean, my parents, suppose, like anybody else, they wouldn't, if I decide I'm going to do something, that's it, you know, and everybody knows that about me. So, you know, it wasn't as if anyone was saying, oh, you can't go or you have to stay, or but I was very integral in our family business for nearly 20 years and growing it and developing it. I'm part of a director, so, you know, it certainly wasn't easy, and to walk away from that to just set up your own business from complete scratch in a new industry. You know, I said to someone, starting a business is difficult, leaving your family business is difficult, starting in a new industry is difficult, and COVID has nearly wrecked most people. Well, I did all 4 of those things in a 12-month period.
So you don't make it easy for yourself. So
Pardon?
You don't make it easy on yourself in terms.
No, well, I didn't foresee the 4th one coming. And, you know, entrepreneurs, again, our biggest asset is, you know, we see the end result and the vision, and we don't see the roadblocks along the way. Otherwise we maybe wouldn't do it. But when you're in it, you have, you know, people say to me, how do you do it? I said, you have no choice.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you do have a choice, but I mean, for me, there is no choice. Once you start, that's it. You have to keep continuing on.
So if you look back over those formative years and before you set out on your own, what are the key strengths that you think you developed, the value set that you developed as a next gen family member in that period that will set you in good stead for the next stage in your career?
I think one of the skills that I've developed the strongest, I'm a natural people person. And I developed very much how to bring people along with me and how to develop people as the business grows. So that's one strength. The other strength I would have, and what I've developed, is very much forward looking in a business. So that's why I do what I do now. So, you know, how do you go in and do something very innovative? How do you turn something on its head? How do you, you know, what's the next 2, 3, 5 years going to look like? And then building a very good plan to make that happen. So, you know, innovation and all these words is very fluffy, but, you know, I grew up in a very traditional, old fashioned, in a good way. You know, stuff has to happen. So making things happen. Yeah, that's probably, you know, I'm putting systems and structures and the right people in place to deliver that. And that would be the key things.
Okay, and then the flip side of that question, again, or the obvious question, Cara, to ask is, what are the kind of the barriers you? I mean, we talked earlier on off camera actually about the quest for legitimacy and some of the roles that next gen find themselves doing or not doing, and some of the pinch points for them. What were the pinch points of the challenge that you probably learned the most from in terms of being in a family business but then making that decision to leave? What were your pinch points, and what were the drivers to then make that final decision? Were they family business related, or was it just personal drive?
Probably a bit of both. We talked about this earlier, Paul, and we're focusing very specifically today on entrepreneurial next gens, and I think they're the biggest asset and the biggest problem for a family business. So I'm second generation, so you've got one of our founders is very, very entrepreneurial. I would be similar. So when you're like that, you want to be a driver, you want to change things, you want to make things happen. When I use the analogy of a cruise ship and a speedboat. When you've got a cruise ship, which is the size of our business now, you can't go changing lots of things all the time. And so I do think, as you said, in terms of Russ and Jamie in the book, The Quest for Legitimacy, I certainly see a lot of next gens, and definitely entrepreneurial ones. There is a drive and an innate hunger in them that they're going to make their own mark in the world. And can you do it in your family business? Yes. Could I have, I did do it to a certain extent in my family business, but I just felt there were other things and other ways and other impacts in the world I wanted to have as well as that. And I couldn't do both. So
that led you onto the path that you're on now, then, in terms of you're clearly the classic, you're clearly a next generation family member, and you're clearly very entrepreneurial in terms of what you do. So talk me through the thought process then to how you're setting up now to help other entrepreneurs, because you're not just helping next gens, you're specifically aiding and helping entrepreneurial next gen. So how did that niche, because that's a fine kind of a small portion of the next gen population in family firms, how did that come to fruition, Cara?
Yeah, well, I suppose there's the next gens who, again, want to make an impact, want to either develop their own family business, they've taken it over, and they want to develop it and grow it and put their own mark on it, or next gens who maybe have either left their family business or they have their own business as well, and they're scaling that. So my skill set is growth of a business, not startup. And again, it's bringing in the processes and the systems and what I used in business. There's nothing that we certainly did a lot of learning. We brought in experts. I did my MBA and whatnot, but there's nothing that I use with other next gens that hasn't actually worked for me in terms of the success we have in our own business. So it's certainly not textbook stuff. And very much in coming in, and I suppose there's two facets to it. One is the business, how we're going to develop that, and the other is the next gen themselves. So their own leadership, their own development, their own personal psyche. There's in all of us, there's hold us back, or cause us challenges, and as next gen, some of that baggage, you can see that impact in their business. So we work on both those things together. Yeah. And in groups, we do groups of next gens together, from different industries for that whole innovation piece. And one of the things that was very important to me in terms of my learning was proactive going to different industries when I was developing our business. So in my head, I thought, well, if I want to learn about efficiency, well, I'll go to manufacturing because they're the experts in lean. If I want to know about customer experience, you would go to the hospitality industry. Obviously that was our industry. So I would have brought in experts from different industries into our business, which is very unusual because, of course, everybody says, no, you bring in people with experience in your industry, but they think very often the same way. So you're not going to do anything different. So that's where, the groups that I have are specifically, that's part of the ethos that they're learning, and getting expertise from other industries that they couldn't otherwise get anywhere else.
It's interesting how you've kind of formed the route down into the entrepreneurial next gens, because I think a lot of people talk about next gens, they're either in or they're out, and I think listening to you and you see it in a different way, because it's actually there's almost like a hybrid model, isn't there, that you can still be in the family business but doing your own thing. So how often do you come across that type of scenario, or is it more black and white?
No, at the minute I still see it black and white. And well, you got a good corporate job and you moved up the ranks, or you went into the family business. And I think that's still happening in business next gens who are well educated. So a lot of entrepreneurial next gens don't fit the corporate mold. Now, that's not to say that they shouldn't go into corporate world. I was in it. You know, I worked in Marks and Spencer's. There is learning to be had from it. But I think families and next gens need to look at the world now, the way the world is going and work. You know, so one of my very entrepreneurial, who wants to do different things. Actually, I've one example that's a really good example. Manufacturing business in Canada. Father's now the chairperson of it. The son has taken over the family business. The daughter's in tech, really into tech, so she has set up her own business in technology, type technology. And the father, there's investment from the family business to support her, and the father's also partly involved in her business, helping her get that up and running. So, you know, I think there is a mix, but you do need to give next gen, you know, particularly entrepreneurs, freedom. It's their driver now, it's not the parents. But you know, one of the things, actually, I was at an event recently, and one of the guys, James Shore, and I were chatting, and he was saying one of the things we do, you know, next gens need to be careful of, you know, say someone like me, you leave and you leave everything behind, you know, you want to do your own things, you're nearly so determined you're going to succeed on your own that you don't use any of your family assets. So you don't use any of the relationships, you don't use any of the advisors, you know, because I know advisors for parents, they might have known you growing up, so that creates a different dynamic. So I just think it's not one or the other. I think there has to be a blend, or there could be a blend which could work very well for people, that doesn't leave, you know, this very distinct, well, you have to stay or you have to go.
And I guess the last couple of years with the pandemic, in terms of working from home and the whole way the world is changing its approach to work, that almost plays straight into the hands of the entrepreneur next gen, doesn't it? They're adaptable, they're innovative, they're flexible, they can work anywhere. So that, in a way, does that help some of the conversations move on rather than become a blocker?
It does. You know, I think the timing is right now. You know, I understand why the now generation, you know, I suppose very much one of the things that the beginning certain industries, so well, you know, people can't be trusted to work at home. Well, actually, you know, they can. Some people can. So, you know, the world is changing so fast, and I do think, you know, there is, depending on the industry, you know, some industries it works very well and some it doesn't. But I just think even just opening up the conversation, you know, I always say to our team, not even just with this, you know, if there was no limits, what could we do here? What is possible? But because no one really knows any other way, we just stick to the same one and the other. Now, I've no doubt it probably makes it even more complex in terms of succession planning and whatnot. But if, you know, maybe someday I have my own children, and would I want a very capable next gen entrepreneurial person setting up their own business that could ultimately feed back into the bigger business and succeed? Well, yes, I would, rather than leave completely. So that's probably my take on it.
And so that's a really interesting, it's an interesting concept when you kind of go from first generation, or a family business entrepreneur that's next generation, but setting up a first generation family business, and then where it goes down the line, does it become a traditional kind of family business, or does it become the hub for other things to spin out? Do you, when you're talking to entrepreneur next gens that you come across, are they in specific sectors more so than others, or are they literally, it could be anything?
Anything. No, they're in every industry.
Which doesn't surprise me, given that you listen to the way you were brought up and the opportunities that you had, and the desire just to make a difference and make a change. What do you think are the challenges to the next generation of family firms across the UK, well, across the world, but in particular across the UK, that stops them leaving to do their own thing? What are the biggest barriers?
Safety net. You know, we talk about the golden, you know, in the corporate world, it's the golden handcuffs, and family business, it's the golden cage.
Yeah.
You know, it's one hell of a security blanket to leave. And not just financial, and you know, you've everything, you've finances, you've business relationships, it's what you've known your whole life. But the emotional piece, I say at the beginning, I didn't realize your whole identity, your family unit is tied into it. And so there's a lot of undercurrent stuff, causes a huge challenge to leaving.
Yeah. But if you make that more, turn it into a more personal question in terms of you, do you still miss certain things about being within that comfort blanket from being in the family business, or you just self-propelled now and you're going on your own journey, you're very happy and driven?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably slightly different in that I never really need a safety blanket. I never missed the safety blanket or the comfort once I'd left. I suppose the bit that I miss is I know what I'm good at, and there's a few things I'm very good at, and there's a hell of a lot of things I'm terrible at. And when you start your own business, you have to do everything, and that drives me crazy because there's people who are far more competent at a lot of things. So that startup phase I don't enjoy. You know, building a team, having a team around me, leading them, driving something much bigger. That's what I miss. But apart from that, no. And you know, and for anyone out there who is thinking about it and worried, people say to me, did you ever have any regrets or any doubts or any, you know,
That was my next
all
question.
through the last 4 years, all through COVID, you know, when COVID hit, my business was only 6 months old. You know, my type of industry is one of the first things to get caught. There's never been a split second that I've doubted it.
So it's about, I guess, the pride, the passion, the dream, but then having the tools around you and building quickly the tools around you to make you have more chance of succeeding.
Yeah.
And is that something in terms of the conversations that you have with other next gens and other entrepreneurial next gens that have this idea? Is there often a disconnect at the startup? They just want it all to happen and they just need to put the steps and the bricks in the wall to make sure they've got the platform and the foundations to grow. Is that a commonality?
Yes, no, it's, yeah, well, if you know, say for example, you know, my journey, you know, I left a business with 700 employees, 8 or 9 businesses, you know, multi-million pound turnover. And the next day I'm sitting in an office on my own, and then 6 months later it's lockdown with, you know, start out with no turnover, you know, so it's a huge step down, certain way, being responsible. So getting your head around that and figuring out, and as you say, just getting the simple things in place early on is key.
Yeah, and I guess that if you look back, I mean, when I started FBU now 11 years ago, there were tools around to help. There seem to be more tools around to help people now in terms of online accounting platforms, online payroll. There's all sorts of stuff that wasn't there before. So you've kind of got, I guess, almost like a perfect storm. You've got entrepreneur or an entrepreneur next gen that wants to do something with lots of tools to make it easier. So there is scope, isn't there, to step out and actually achieve something and make it happen, probably more so now than maybe 10, 15 years ago.
Oh, there is definitely. It's, you know, much more, you know, even take like VAs, you know, contractors, Fiverr, all those things, where you can bring in people, you know, in the gig economy, all the systems. And I'm not the strongest in technology in terms of tech people, but I was very clear in my head with the team, as much as we can automate early on. So we're looking for systems all the time to try and automate and build a business on that as well. Because I believe people should be doing value add and proper work and adding value to customers and anything else in the background, as you said, Xerox and accountancy systems that are just a process or a system. Well, then we need to find a machine to do it.
So your approach to what you do now, is it still the same as it was before, or has it been family businessized in terms of it's you've taken all the best bits of the family business environment, your desire to make a difference and your drive, mixed the two and then added some more and you've become something different? Or are you still very much the same Cara that was there but just with a different vision?
I'm probably a bit different. I would say, I mean, when you're everybody in any family, you know, we all behave with any family structure, whether it's family business or not, and the family and the business merge into one. So you play a role. I mean, I'm the only girl and I'm the baby, so there's certain conditioning, and that's just me, that's everybody. So when you're not in that, you step into your own, you know, so you find your own feet more. So I would say I'm different. Yeah, friends say I'm different. People say I look a bit different. Don't know whether that's a good thing, or they don't tell me whether it's any better or any worse, Paul, but
I'm not going to go there because that's just dangerous ground.
No, you didn't know me before, so you can't say.
I think you've got a great raison d'etre, and you've got a great passion for what you do, and I think that shines through when you talk about your sector and what you do. What do you love most about your day?
The impact I can have with other next gens through their business and seeing their development and their, you know, when I did that care home, the impact that had on people. I thought if I can do that in lots of industries and help lots of other next gens do that,
yeah, the
satisfaction they'll get. Because I spoke to a next gen this morning, and he said his biggest motivation as CEO now is the emotional motivation that he gets, staff development, impacting customers, impacting the community. So that's mine.
So making a difference. And you said just now you don't want to spend time doing the back office stuff that's just routine and process. It's actually about making a difference.
Oh, you would never put me into that job, Paul. You would fire me. Yeah.
I've met you enough times, actually, to be honest. I think I probably do know that. And we talked just now about just looking at your bookshelf behind you, the fact that all color coordinated in the colors of the rainbow behind you tends to suggest that actually you'd be lost in a world of paperwork and probably not come out for days. So I think
yeah, that's exactly right.
What do you see as I don't know your challenges, but for the next gen now that are sitting at home, they're in a family business, they're quite happy, as you say, wrapped in their comfort blanket, but maybe not feeling they're achieving what they want to and not fulfilling their dreams. What advice would you give to them?
Go and talk to someone, whether it's me or, one of the things that holds them back more than anything is confidence.
Mm-hmm.
I've met a lot of next gens who are a lot better than they realize they are. And that's not to say they don't have flaws and they don't have things they need to learn. They certainly do. But I, just don't have any regrets. I mean, the last 2 years have taught us life is very, very short. If, I always say to people, if you've one spark in there, a dream of something you want to achieve, go after it. But that's, my life is better to say I shouldn't have done it than wondering if I should have. I can't wonder. If it's there, I have to go after it. And don't think about it too long. I mean, I remember hearing a quote years ago, make decisions quickly and change your mind slowly.
Yeah, it's good. That's really good. That's kind of how I think, listening to you and having not really thought about it, that's kind of how I set FB up 11 years ago. It was a dream. Yeah. I wanted to do it. Didn't really think it wouldn't work. Has worked. And actually every day is about making it work better and do what he wants to do. And there's always a solution. So it's finding the solution to do. So I think we're quite similar in terms of the drive and the space. You mentioned just then that actually a lot of next gens are often better than they think they are. And I think I agree with that, because they're often in a space where they just don't have the opportunity to show their skill or their drive or their added value within the business, which I think is why some leave. You then said there are things they need to learn. What are the key things that you think the next gen, and it's difficult to generalize, but they should learn before starting out on a journey like the one you did in terms of setting up something on their own? What are the things that are often missing when you talk to them?
You need to learn how to lead and develop people.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I did my MBA, we talked about people, and some of the finance guys in the MBA said, "No, here goes Mrs. HR." And a lot of finance people think HR are soft and fluffy, and I thought, well, God help these guys, because they'll find out very quickly I'm not that. But there's
and neither is HR actually as a value add.
No, they're not.
It's integral, isn't
it? My view, okay, people argue, my background is very heavy people-orientated businesses. I've said for years and years, good businesses don't run and grow unless you lead and develop the people properly. And lockdown has shown us people can go anywhere. I always believe good people can go anywhere anyway, even in a recession. And get a clear plan, talk about vision and strategy. And I don't like them big words, but a clear, let's say, vision of where you want to go with the business, and align it with your personal stuff in life, so your values, and then just get into your room. We do a thing called a one-page plan. Strategy documents of 20-30 pages, load of rubbish. One-page plan. It's really hard work, and then you drive the business on that and you grow it. So that's probably the two key things. In terms of how to do those two things.
Yeah, I mean, I've come from a professional services background, and I'm looking at all those books behind you, From Good to Great and all the other ones there. So you've clearly done an awful lot of research to get to where you are. But as you say, you can spend months producing a 30-page strategy document, but at the end of the day, you have to do it. So I think turning it into a one-page plan is kind of what I did. I think it works really well because it just focuses you just on what needs to be done now, and then you review it over time and you can build on that. And that's what I guess the Entrepreneurial next gens will do, but it'll be a living one-page plan that's constantly changing.
Yeah.
What are the opportunities in terms of, for someone like you, how do you engage and find the people that can do with talking to someone like you and the skills that you have? How do you go about finding them?
Family business groups, Family Business United, other groups. I mean, next gens, there's, it wasn't something that I had specifically in terms of next gens, and it would have been really useful. So yeah, and people reach out to me then when, someone works with me and someone knows someone. So they reach out to me or some of the guys in the business. So I do think, I'm certainly working hard at building up, the right network of advisors, because we all do slightly different things. And, I do think we need to work together better for family businesses. and align the dots better. So that's probably the two main ways. LinkedIn's been really good for me as well, actually.
Yeah, I think networking full stop. So you were talking about the kind of the social get together, physical networking, but also the integral. LinkedIn is brilliant as a tool when it's used properly, isn't it?
Yes.
And I'd probably strongly agree in terms of, I think professional services, everyone's an expert in their field. Not everyone's an expert in detailed family business consulting, psychometrics and analysis, and all the things that go with the relationship dynamics. I think it's really important from a family business perspective that they get all-round advice. And I think you're right, that working together really helps. Will certainly help and put them in the right position to grow as an individual. Where do you see yourself in 10 years' time? You probably don't think 10 years. 10 years
I do. Yeah, I want this business to be a lot bigger, Paul, in terms of there's lots of things next gens need and lots of things I needed that would have helped me. So there's the entrepreneurial side, which is obviously my passion. There's a lot of work around next gens in the family business. You know, the three big challenges when you're in the family business is finding your place, finding your voice, and making change. So there's a whole side of the business sitting at the minute that we're developing for that. And we want to work, you know, our targets are the UK and America. Because again, I like the difference between, you know, the entrepreneurial side and obviously in the UK here where we do things slightly differently. I have another idea for a sustainable fashion business. So that's on the horizon, but I'm again a typical entrepreneur. I do too many things at once. So a mentor said to me, Cara, you can do the research and that other business in the background. But the driver for me all the time is the impact, you know, the development of the people, and seeing other, you know, next gens and what they're going to create and as well.
It's interesting. Your drive is, and I'm putting words in your mouth here, but your drive is not money. I mean, we need money to live and do what we need, but your drive is not financial, is it?
No.
It's about the difference, which is very family business related in terms of something I think you can draw from your family business experience. It's maybe not, it's not finance, it's about the difference you can make and the help that you can give to other next gens to achieve what they want to do too. And that's your success point, isn't it?
Well, it is, and this is not, and I hope no one takes offense at this, but people quite often think that women are soft and it's all about that softer stuff and making an impact. And, you know, I'm very focused on money because you don't make an impact without it. You don't get good people without it. You don't. So, you know, for anybody listening, you know, particularly women, don't think that money is not important. You know, you need to run your business financially very strong.
Yeah, I wasn't implying it.
No, you weren't. But just some people can get, and particularly when it comes into the male-female space. Yeah, you know, you need to run a good, sustainable business, and finances is the key part of that. And then with that, you can do good things and make an impact. Which
family firms across the world do. Do you notice, and I'm jumping around a bit now, but do you notice when you said your targets for the UK and the US, are there any noticeable differences between the approach of the individual next gens in those two countries and cultures that make it slightly different to deal with, or are they just so many similarities they have?
Well, there's a lot of similarities around the family dynamics. The American by default is more, you know, risky than we are. That's just culturally. What would have happened in America was next gens would have had to buy the business. In the UK, it would have been more succession planning and given over. And I'm starting to see that change a bit.
Yeah, we are.
I don't know about you, and I think actually, well, two things have happened in COVID that I've noticed, and you and I have talked about this, Paul. One is next gens, their succession planning was happening. The now gen were starting to transition out. COVID hit and they came back in very active because they worried the business was going to go down the pan. So that created challenges then for the next gens, who some of them decided to leave and go and do their own thing. Or the other side was now gens who, you know, with Brexit, with economy, with technology, with staff, and then COVID, they just thought, you know what, we've had enough, we buy it. But they're still a younger age, and they probably, you know, they still want the life, and they probably, you know, might be in their 60s and 70s, they want to travel, they probably want to do the things that their children did in their early 20s that they didn't get to do. So then they're selling the business and creating. So I think it's timing. I think it's the stage that they're at in life. I think COVID sped that up, but that's a change that I've seen that maybe 10 years ago that wouldn't have happened, and you would have had the now generation staying on longer, I think. Where I think it's starting to change.
Yeah, I definitely see some of that in the marketplace too, Cara, in terms of especially the next gen buying the business. I actually think could be a good thing because it gives them literally it's from day one, it's skin in the game, it's theirs, they can do the entrepreneurial piece within the business and add their mark. So I think sometimes that might actually make it more theirs than just because the shares have been passed on or they're being dangled and given away in tranches. I also agree. I think COVID has had a big impact just in terms of general succession. And as you say, some of the older generation some of them actually retired, that have come out of retirement to come back into to save the sinking ship, as they would say. And actually the sink wasn't even sinking, but there's been crossover between the two generations, which is causing frustration. So I think one of the things I often talk about, and I often say, is it's all about, for me, communication and honest conversation. So the next gen just need to be really honest with what they want, personally within their fulfillment dreams, what they want to do as a career or wherever. And then that leads into other conversations with the older generation, maybe in plans for the business going forward too, or siblings, because unless it's an honest conversation, then people aren't being real honest, and then decisions aren't being made properly. So a lot of
it's the elephant in the rooms now. And I mean, this is not, in terms of maybe an advisor, but you cannot do it on your own. Those honest conversations, you just can't. I mean, I know lots of other advisors, the work they do. I've never seen any family business do this kind of stuff on their own properly. Because even when it's not an issue, I've seen the other extreme where everybody's trying to keep each other happy. So, there's lots of, and even the right person to be able to ask the right questions, to pull out the information is key. Yeah,
I totally agree. I could talk to you all afternoon, but I actually want to keep this fresh and on point. If you were sitting in the audience, assume the world outside is listening to you now, and you're an entrepreneur next gen listening to you, what piece of advice, there's two questions here. One, what piece of advice would you have given to yourself younger, 20 years ago, maybe before you started out? What advice would you give to yourself? And what would you suggest to the next gen sitting out there they should go away and really think about in terms of what they want to do in their decision-making process? So advice to your younger self, but actually advice now 20 years later to someone sitting in your shoes that could be about to embark on their own journey. What's your advice?
So my advice to myself 20 years ago would have been, you can achieve more than you believe you can. That would have been, and my advice to people sitting now. So I'm going to imagine someone who, might want to leave or do their own thing. If you're thinking about it at all, I would do it. The hardest part for next gens who want to leave, it's what do they do? And then they don't know what to do. So then the buyer's like, well, this is better to stay here. So if you're at that stage that you want to do something, and then, well, what do you do? Because you look at the corporate world and that's not the right place for you. Reach out and talk to someone. I'm more than happy to talk to anyone, because there's lots more options than just family business, start your own business, or go and work in a corporate.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's really good advice, because actually it's start that conversation, but start an honest conversation with yourself and with someone to challenge you and to put some barriers into the fray. Just so it's not all rosy. There's risk, there's opportunity, but actually you need to make the right decision for you at the right time. Cara, you're amazing. It's great to speak to you. I've really enjoyed the session this afternoon. I wish you all the best. I'm following your journey anyway, but I wish you all the best in your ongoing journey. If we can help in any way, you know where we are. It's great to talk to you, and yeah, keep safe and well. And I look forward to the next stage in your chat for your journey.
Thank you so much. Lovely to see you again, Paul. Thanks for having me on today.
Angie, thank you so much, and keep safe.
Bye.